discussion? Representative Hamann?
Thank you.
So I think Representative Hamann has another solution. So I think I'm going to ask him to put that out there. And then I think we should talk about it. And if people think it's a good idea, I can withdraw my motion if necessary and or amend it, depending on where we are. And go forward. So I'm going to suggest that the chair recognize Representative Hamann.
Representative Hamann.
So, rather than go through all the details, it seems like what would be the easiest solution would be to simply, speaking with the department, it seems like this might be a workable solution, have the department develop a formalized waiver process to keep this market analysis in place, keep these rates in place in the interest of cost containment and respecting rates around the state and frankly fiscal forecasting. However, establish a waiver process formalized so that if a foster parent has reasonable circumstances where they might need to send their kid to a daycare that's slightly more expensive, that the foster parent isn't on the hook paying the difference, or that foster parent isn't excluded from being a foster parent. So I think that's something that doesn't have to be moved as a bill. I think that's something that could, it seems like the department's open to working on that process. And as part of that, negotiating rates with some of those daycare providers who are charging more than the outlier, the outlier rates. I would, in the process of developing those waiver criteria, the criteria being what we mentioned earlier, if there's a daycare that's close to where the foster parent works, or if there's a biological parent or a biological child in the foster home who goes to a particular daycare, is reasonable to have a foster child go to that daycare facility as well. There might be other, I'm sure there are other circumstances that are reasonable in the waiver process that I'm not aware of, that Martin might not even be aware of. I'd like to have some stakeholder input from a couple of foster parents, maybe even a statewide organization representing foster parents. I think adoptive and foster parents are being, and maybe just 4 or 5 people probably won't take long. I'm sure you all know what the answer is, and what are the reasonable circumstances that that go into the decision of deciding where to send a foster child to daycare, and sit down and hash out some waiver criteria. If that's something that, and not, so if that seems like something that would be reasonable. So I know the motion on the table is not passed as amended, but so I'll stop there.
So I'm a little confused. So what specifically are you proposing is done with it? I'm hearing maybe something's being done to the bill as a vehicle, something's being done separate from the bill, or is everything being done? So if you could enlighten me.
I'm sure. My motion will be not to pass with a letter to the department to develop our waiver criteria, working with the stakeholder group I mentioned.
Oh, all right. I'll support that.
Second.
Well, wait,
I had a motion as to
there's a
withdraw.
motion on the floor. Again, thank you, Representative Hamann. Again, for the purposes of continuing this conversation, I'll withdraw my motion with leave of my second.
All right, the motion's been withdrawn. Is there a new motion on the floor? Representative Hamann?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I make the motion not to pass with a letter to the department.
Moved and seconded by Representative Hamann and Representative Sanderson not to pass with the letter. Senator Haskell.
I'd just like to say I really appreciate the cooperation of the department in understanding this issue and in offering up some suggestions, thoughts, and positive feedback for us regarding this bill. It's much appreciated.
Any additional discussion? Seeing none. Then without objection, we'll take a vote. All in favor of the motion not to pass with the letter, please raise your hand. It appears to be unanimous. Do we have the gold star for
Representative Hammond?
Representative Hammond, well, I'm gonna kind of narrow that way a little bit. The department's immediate participation was very helpful.
All right.
Right here.
Next, we'll take an LD 1115, an act to make the state standard for lead exposure in children consistent with the federal standards.
I just wanted to mention to the committee that I was told that Dr. Andy Smith from the CDC is available and listening in and can be over here shortly if there's any questions. Hi, Andy. How you doing?
All right. Were there any amendments to this, or are we just, I'm trying to keep all these bills straight in my head. Are we just looking at this one as written? I know this is the second time we're coming up with this.
There is an amendment that should be attached in gray that was submitted by Rick McCarthy dealing with the violation, new violation section.
All right, is there any discussion? Representative Gattini.
Okay, I'm gonna play dumb, maybe only on my own behalf. Someone needs to bring me up to speed on where we left this last time we dealt with this issue. I remember the conversation now with Mr. McCarthy about the violations, but if someone could kind of recap that for us, whether that's Schumacher or the Mr. McCarthy, that would be fine.
If it's
You wanna give it a shot?
specifically about the amendment, I
Yeah,
prefer to
that would be
Mr.
great.
McCarthy.
Is that, I believe the chair,
Chair raises no objection.
Good afternoon, Representative Teen, Senator Brakey, members of the committee. I'm Rick McCarthy. I'm here this afternoon on behalf of the Maine Affordable Housing Coalition. So to recap, the bill that Senator Volk put in front of you takes the blood level that requires action in the state from 15 micrograms per deciliter down to the federal level of 5. And as we put the bill forward, we started talking with people around in a variety of different communities, and we found that one of the challenges here is that even though those kids are already being tested and we're finding they have elevated blood levels, the CDC is investigating, it's finding that the apartment is the cause of their problems, and it's issuing lead abatement orders, but the landlords are then sometimes not actually doing the abatement that they're supposed to be doing. Under the way the statute is currently written, the CDC then has to involve the AG's office in order to impose fines and issue sanctions against those landlords, because the way it's written, that violation is a Class C crime, so they have to bring the AG's office into the process. The goal of the amendment that's in front of you is to, in addition to that avenue, to give the CDC the authority to issue civil fines, so they could go ahead and issue fines. Same amount as in the current statute, but they could go ahead and issue fines when a landlord doesn't comply with an abatement order.
Discussion? Representative Gattini.
and again, there's no, we haven't had a vote on before on this. We basically last time was talking about the amendment and then
And Dr. Smith walks through the process, but there was just some discussion and then it was decided to table. There's no motion.
thank you.
Representative Sanderson.
Thank you. The original bill started out with lowering this and then, creating inspection pieces. Sorry, I'm trying to find my bill with the actual language. I have the senators here. To reduce the blood levels and such, and then we have the fiscal note for all the new inspectors, 8 individuals staffing for inspectors, and I'm sorry, I didn't read this before, but we're also asking to have a proposed amendment where we impose penalties and prison time.
If I may, the penalties in prison time are in the existing statute. They're the exact same amounts that are in the existing statute. It just this would allow the department to impose the fine civilly without having to go through the AG's office. It doesn't increase any of the penalty.
Okay, but again, we had a conversation in the hall. So, are you going to impose this on homeowner?
The CDC policy is that they don't issue abatement orders against homeowners, and they don't require them to do the abatement in the house. They tell them if there's a problem and recommend that they take action. They don't require it. So the lead abatement order would be imposed on a landlord, not on a homeowner. If the child's parents own the home where they're residing, they would not issue an order. That's not the policy.
Additional discussion? All right, Representative Guttini.
Again, I guess I'd love to get a sense for, I'm supportive of the bill, and I'm supportive of the amendment. I'd be interested to get a sense as to where the committee members are on this. Because I think it's important to keep our concerns, talking about it and try to work with them.
Yes, Senator McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have some comments. As someone who grew up in one of my favorite pastimes was going to the local hardware store, buying a brick of lead, bringing it home and melting it in a cooking pot, pouring it into molds, and making lead soldiers and anything else that we desired to do. All lead paint was lead-based. Gasoline was lead-based. Our fishing things were lead sinkers. Lead in all the buckshot I shot. I think we've come a long way since then and made great efforts to reduce lead in our environment and our kids. But when I get old, I will probably exhibit some problems from the lead I have. But
Very much.
I lost by the time you're 72. We haven't, and it's not a laughing matter, but we have made such great progress that I don't think we need to continually reduce these levels. I don't know how much benefit there is, and so I would be opposed to this change.
Thank you, Senator. Joking aside, thank you for your thoughts. Additional discussion? Representative Guttini.
Mr. McCarthy, anything else you want to add? Are you still sitting there?
Yeah. What I would say to Senator McCormick is, you're right, we've made a lot of progress, and things are better in many, many ways. A couple of things. In terms of lead exposure, it's most dangerous when they're young, especially in those early years. That's why we're testing kids at 1 and 2. Every main care kid gets their blood tested, and this protocol is for up to age 6. That's when they're going to do the most damage. And the more we learn from the science is that levels that previously people thought weren't that serious levels of concern really do cause significant and long-term permanent damage to kids. Levels that are below the 15 micrograms that results in intervention here in Maine now. So that's what we'd like to see it lower. So.
have we seen any, I remember talking about this at the public hearing. Have we seen any data, has any data been presented to us on, so we're saying that below the 15, apologies if I get the terminology wrong, micrograms per deciliter. Saying that it can still cause damage. How often does that cause damage? I mean, so we're saying moving this down to 5, is that what we're saying?
Yes.
How often in that range, when someone is between that range of 5 and 15, do we have any data on how often it does cause damage? Because we're hearing that it does.
Right,
But-
right, we sent you some information in a memo, it should be in there, about that. I can't tell you X percentage of kids, but what the science says is that there's no safe level of lead exposure. The longer you're elevated, obviously the more damage that it causes, but it's not safe to be above 5. It's not really safe to be 2 or 3, but we have to, set the bar somewhere. The reality is that there's an awful lot of older housing in Maine, like the oldest housing stock in the country. That's the housing that has the lead-based paint. And it's when the paint starts breaking down and there's dust, and kids pick it up on their hands, or the paint on the outside, and that soil right outside the window is full of lead, and they pick it up on their hands and they ingest it. So we can't tell you if you're at 7 and 50% of those kids are gonna be impacted. We know they're all gonna be impacted to some degree, some significantly, some less so, but it impacts everybody.
I guess, I'm this being an issue in the Lewiston Auburn area and Brooklyn, Auburn, I'm inclined to support this in some way, shape, or form. I know it's the federal number, so I know it's not completely arbitrary for us to peg it to the federal number, but I'm trying to understand. It just seems like the number's arbitrary to begin with. I mean, it seems like 15 is arbitrary, 5 is arbitrary. We could just as easily say 0, I mean, not that I'm suggesting we should go to 0, because I think that would result in a lot of additional problems. So I guess I just wonder, what is the actual, because there's a cost associated with going from 15 to 5. I guess I wonder, is there any way we can measure the harm that's being done by us being at 15 instead of 5? And I guess I'm just trying to, it's hard to weigh the cost and the benefit when it's the cost is.
Right, and we showed you earlier the best research we have, and I'm an expert on all of that, but we clearly need to take action. The state itself has acknowledged it. 15 is the level in most parts of the state, but because Lewiston Auburn has the worst problem, they've already lowered it to 10 in Lewiston Auburn. And as I said, the research shows that 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 does cause the kind of brain damage associated with lead poisoning.
So municipalities have the authority to do this themselves?
The CDC, and I'm not sure exactly what the thought process was, but the CDC chose to intervene at above 10 in the Lewiston Auburn area. I think because they were the area with the greatest problem.
Okay, so this wasn't the municipality acting
No, it was the state.
Independently. It was the state saying this is a real problem, especially here. We're going to take some extra measures in this particular area. Okay. Representative Burstein and Senator Haskell on there. Representative Gattini, Mike. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Senator. I'm reading here that there are effects at levels as low as 5 micrograms per deciliter, and that's from the Robert Bush Hospital. So, and I know these are long-term effects. This is like, you're dealing with IQ levels, and so I think lowering it, to a federal standards, it's just kind of common sense to protect our kids and keep people healthy. So.
And Representative, I agree with you that it's like we're saying that there are effects. I'm just asking the question. If the effects are 1 in a million, then then there are effects. Or if it's 1 in 50 or 1 in
Is there
what if
anybody-
five, you know,
maybe there's
so we're
someone
talking
here
about,
who could speak
we're
to
talking
that.
about different, either,
Yeah.
any of those scenarios, you could say there are effects, there are potential effects from this. But it's just, as I'm trying to wrestle with this and figure out, you know, figure out how to spend limited resources, that, anyway, Senator Haskell.
Maybe this will help. This is from a study done in the Lewis and Auburn Collaborative. There were 797 children with elevated blood levels of 5 milligrams of higher in Maine. 70 higher in Maine. I'm sorry, it wasn't Lewis and Auburn. It was in Maine. 79 of those children had blood levels above 10. That means there were 718 kids between 5 and 10. So I guess my question is, what do we tell those 718 kids? Because we're only doing the 79 of those. This is on the Coalition to End Childhood Lead Poisoning on the back page. 797 children with elevated blood levels of 5 or higher in Maine in 2013. 79 of those children had levels of 10 or higher. So it was only the homes and the kids with 10, it was only the homes with 10 and higher that were subject to the need. I'm not saying that they, folks might not have done it, but I'm just saying 718 then, that didn't rank high enough to have their landlords checked out, their services provided, their health concern.
I guess the question, and that's helpful, I appreciate having those numbers. What I'm trying to figure out though is, so we say that 79 of those children had elevated blood levels of 10 or higher.
Right.
It does not necessarily follow, and I don't necessarily know of those 79, how many then actually had negative health consequences as a result of that. Was that all 79? Was that half of them? Was that, it's like we're looking at, here's this thing that can cause problems, but I've not necessarily seen numbers on how many people, what's the percentage of it causing those problems.
I think some of that depends upon whether one of those 79 kids is yours. When it's your kid, that's pretty scary. When it's your grandkid, when it's your brother's kid. What does this mean for them? Does this mean that his cognitive ability is going to be impaired?
Representative Hymanson?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm looking at this as the article we have in Pediatrics, which is a great journal. It's peer-reviewed. It's elevated blood levels and reading readiness at the start of kindergarten. And I've been trying to go through it to give you the bottom line numbers, and it's hard. I've forgotten my statistical significance stuff, and I'd have to go through it a little more carefully, except to tell you that there were 3,500 people in Rhode Island, kids in Rhode Island who were looked at, and their blood levels were less than 5, 5 to 9, or greater than 10 in those 3 categories. And I'm looking for the significance, but their bottom line was that reading readiness is independently associated with blood levels well below 10, and that was surprising. I didn't expect that. So there is an association, and I was looking for the numbers. So I thought I would jump in and tell you that the answer to your question is here in this article, but I haven't come to it yet. But here is the answer. So I'll continue.
Is this one of the, this is something we have
This is the
in this?
Pediatrics Journal.
This is pediatrics.
Oh.
It's attached to the Affordable Housing Coalition.
And I just want to say, I hope, I'm sure the committee knows this, I'm not trying to just be obstinate. Like, I'm really trying to, yeah, I think everything, especially when we're talking about using, taxpayer funds, we've only got so many resources, and we're really trying to evaluate the cost benefit of all the different things we're proposing, so.
Yeah, and I have to say, it is brain development we're talking
Yeah.
about, so that's the real issue. And I think if I had a child and their lead level was anything more than 0, for
I'd be
me,
good.
I would move in a heartbeat. But I have the resources to do that, and so,
Maybe helpful for you. Next to the last page, it says conclusions. Oh, all right. I don't mean to belabor that. Is there tables, I'm trying to see if there's a control group in the. There's an easy comparison thing. If I'm the only one kind of asking these questions, I mean, I'm happy to review some of this after. I imagine this is, I think this is an issue that really affects my district, so I imagine I'm going to vote for it. So I don't need to be holding up the process if no one else is kind of wrestling with these same questions, but.
And
Mr. McCarthy.
yes, I'm looking at the pediatrics report, and if I'm reading the table correctly, on page 1087, there's a table that talks about difference in adjusted mean fall, PALS K-score, which means it's the standardized test given to kids, and it's difference in adjusted score based on blood level, so a reference is 1, and as you can see, if I'm reading this correctly, the blood level category, as it goes up, you can see with the exception of a blip up between 8 and 9, it's steadily going down. So at all levels, as you go out, their scores are being reduced compared to the mean. So it shows as the blood level gets higher, the impact gets greater.
thank you.
We're looking at this bar graph right here?
Yeah, figure 3.
Sorry, look at figure 2?
Figure 3.
Oh, I'm on the wrong page. Ah,
Page
okay.
1087, yeah.
That's why I was so confused. Representative Heinzen.
Thanks. So, I think our problem is the fiscal note. I think if there was no fiscal note or it was very small, we'd all say, of course we'll do this. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to jump in and say, I support the kids in your district in Auburn as much as I do down in my district. And I'm going to support their brain development because I think, you only have one brain and you start off small and no one wants lead in it. So I would mitigate it and just go for the fiscal note. So I'm going to support this bill.
Representative Vashon.
I'm going to support this also, and would like to throw an idea on the fiscal note. It looks to me like this is
not gonna be an ongoing thing, because over a few years, eventually, we're gonna be solving this problem. I'm wondering if this would be something that the Fund for Healthy Maine could pay for. I don't know, just thought I'd mention that idea.
I did have similar thoughts, though, I didn't express them, so.
Well, I mean,
Yes.
they had that $5 million they were trying to figure out how to spend, and I think that this would be a good use. It's not an ongoing bill, this is going to solve a problem and be what it's for.
Representative Sanderson?
Thank you. What are the proper mitigations that they're actually looking for? Are we talking removal of all lead paint, or are we talking painting over and sealing existing lead paint that may be there?
I wonder, can I ask Greg Payne from the Vesta Housing and talk, he's more familiar with that than I am.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Greg Payne. I'm the director of the Maine Affordable Housing Coalition. And I think, not being one of the inspectors themselves who goes out and does this, I think generally that what happens is I'm sorry, could you repeat the question again?
When we're talking about the mitigation process, you're going to be forcing landlords to take action to either remove or seal the lead paint, correct? Or you're going to be imposing
Right.
these penalties and fines and perhaps up to 6 months in jail if they don't. What are you expecting them to do to mitigate and correct the
Right.
problem?
So I think the hope is that people do the easy mitigation up front, and they do the encapsulation of lead. If they, if landowners just do that as an ongoing thing and prevent a child from getting poisoned, then none of the abatement, which, costs more like in the range of $8,000 if you get to that point, has to happen. If it does get to the point where you didn't undertake that kind of care of the property and a kid did get poisoned, then a real abatement has to occur and the poison has to be removed from the apartment.
Mhm. Well, isn't this where maybe municipalities and towns can take an active participation in that by requiring that there be no peeling or chipping paint in apartments in their cities?
I mean, I suppose they could. I think that in the real world, I'm assuming what happens is that the municipalities lack the budget to enforce that in every one of the units. I think
Well, that would be
this
part of
is-
a code inspection to make sure that they're up to code.
Yeah, I think, just to bring it back a little bit, I think this whole protocol is existing, and we're not looking to completely blow up the existing process as much as just to catch up with current science. That's all this is.
Well, and I understand that, but it's my understanding there may be $1 million left on the table after things over in appropriations, and with the fiscal note that you got on here, it's probably not going to be a priority. So I'm trying to figure out a way to either lower this fiscal note and still accomplish what you're after here. It's just trying to think of other ways to accomplish your goal is what I'm trying to do. And how can you do that in a partnership without hiring 4 full-time inspectors and 4 part-time inspectors, 8 new individuals, 8 new positions for an inspection and remediation follow-up process. That's what I'm trying to figure out here, so.
Okay, yeah, and I guess I think it's hard just in my position if the question is, what could the cities all do? I kind of feel like I'd have to defer to the municipalities on what that would mean, in terms of hiring code enforcement people to kind of take that role more than they can right now. So I just don't feel like I'm in a great position to speak for them and their ability to do that.
Well, this is one of those bills where the bill is not wrong, the intent is not wrong, the goal is not wrong. But I don't like the fiscal note on there, you know what I mean? And I know this is a time-limited fiscal note. And I'm just wondering if, with the lowering of these standards, if there has been enough outreach to municipalities such as the city councils in Lewiston, where there has been a large problem, to involve their code enforcement officers in part of the inspection process to make sure that the paint is intact and you have the encapsulated, it's not chipping and it's not peeling, as part of an inspection of these apartment buildings to make sure that they're up to code.
Representative Stuckey?
I'm a little curious about how the bill is set up. Isn't it to afford people the opportunity to have their house, their apartment inspected? I mean, it's not something, we're not expecting every rental unit in the state to be inspected, are we?
No, I think the way the process works is it's just when a child comes back with an elevated blood lead level, that triggers, and right now that threshold being 15, all those test results come to the CDC, and they then say, okay, we'll send out an inspector to find out if the exposure's in the home. It's not always in the home, but the inspector does. So I think it's just in that circumstance that.
I have had some in another lifetime experience with the process, and the equipment is quite sophisticated. I'm sure it's more sophisticated now than it was 20 years ago. But it requires some training to know how to operate it and interpret the results, and also make the appropriate recommendations for the appropriate abatement, right?
Right.
I mean, as you're suggesting, in some instances, it can be a good coat of paint or a piece of paneling, or in some cases you may have to put the plastic